Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are once again having a look at some of the Dutch tech tree ideas. We are going to be looking at the aviation part, specifically the airplanes. We'll be looking at the helicopters later on, and the way that we're going to do this is we're going to have the tech tree in the background for you to have a look at while we're talking about stuff, and I'll overlay some pictures for specific machines that we're talking about. So we'll make sure to try and go through as many of these machines as possible, but understand, having Super Cacti and Soldier with me today, they have made an incredibly comprehensive set of vehicles that you can see here. And obviously there is some foreign influence, but that is completely fine. We'll talk a little bit about them too. Anyway, let's bring them in. How are you doing, Cacti?
I am doing great. And I hope everybody watching this video is doing great too.
Oh, I'm sure they are. And you, Soldier, how is life on your end?
The same as usual. It's fun, often, so.
Wonderful stuff. So the way that the criteria is set up for this tech tree, I think I'm going to put this to you, Cacti, because obviously looking at it first glance, it may confuse people a little bit. Obviously in the top right, we have a set of colors for each aircraft, and obviously they correspond to some ideas. So do you want to go through them?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the top left, I suppose. So this box has the foreign vehicles that is mostly identical to the foreign model. What this means is, think of a Spitfire that the Dutch used, but that's about it. It's just a British Spitfire in Dutch service. So the way you can identify these, they are like 50-50 flags when it comes to the colors. There's a little bit of Dutch and a little bit of the other nation that it's part of. But you have to take note in the black line. If the black line is mostly on the bottom and it has like mostly the foreign flag in it, this means that it's mostly a foreign model. If we go to the flag thingy to the right of that, you see the opposite. It's mostly Dutch. And like it says in there, it says foreign vehicle that's mostly modified by the Dutch. That means it's more like a Dutch variant. This is mostly apparent when it comes to the ground vehicles, but we set the standard for everything. And then, of course, when you have a full Dutch flag, it's a Dutch vehicle. That's simple as that. When we get to the colors, well, first we have yellow. Like it says, it was built as a mock-up and or a prototype was under construction. Not everybody agrees with this, but it's just a way for us to clarify what the vehicle is. So basically, if a prototype was under construction but not fully completed, it has a yellow line around it. Or same goes for a mock-up. Orange, yeah, it's a slightly different variant or a different version of an existing vehicle, but it was never actually built. So think of production vehicles. We have certain prototype vehicles in this tech tree, but then later on planned production vehicles had different engines or different machine guns, but they were never built, sadly. And the last one is completely red. It's very straightforward. It only existed on paper or blueprint.
Yeah, so I think when we have a look at most of these, I'm sure the majority of people will agree with, having most of these in the tech tree. Obviously, the paper and blueprint stuff can put people a little bit past, but you know how it is. How about you, Soldier? When it comes to the ideas of paper or blueprint vehicles, are you for them? Are you against them? How do you see it? Should they be in the game, or what's your opinion?
Well, I'm pretty opportunistic. I think most of them should be in the game, but I do agree it should be judged on like a case-by-case basis. If there's this vehicle that is just a picture, no data, like that's a bit iffy. Or if it's the other way around, it's like, yeah, here are the specifications, but we don't know how it looks like. Those cases are a bit iffy, but besides that, if it's like an actual blueprint with the specifications in mind, I don't mind them being added. I think that would create a lot of unique variety in the sense that they're often a bit weird.
Yeah, that's true. It pretty much means that the variety aspect of the game is kept. If you have a look at the vehicles, which are like I suppose a little bit bonkers in design, normally they don't get to full production stage. Some of them get to prototypes, but others just are kind of left on the drawing board. And maybe it would be nice to see some of them around the place. How about you, Cacti? When it comes to this idea of paper or blueprint vehicles?
Me personally, I would love to see them in the game. But if we just look at Gaijin's rules, they've said no, and they're doing their best to remove the paper design stuff from the game right now. So if you're against paper or blueprint design vehicles and you're looking at this tech tree, simply just ignore the red and the orange colors. I think yellow is perfectly fine. We have other sort of incomplete prototypes in the game, but the other colors, I would love to see them in game myself. But if we just simply look at the rules, they're not allowed.
Yeah, so I think going from Gaijin standards right now is, especially like the advocation of this tech tree is to get it into the game. So therefore, adding it in the game, you would probably have to take out all of those anyway. So we'll see it from that point of view. So the way that we're gonna go through this tech tree is we're going to do it line by line. Basically left to right, having a look at each rank vehicles, all the way from the Koolhoven, all the way to the wonderful Canada, or Canadair, which is always a hard word to say. Right, so leaders in, soldier. Let's have a chat about the FK-51.
All right. Yeah, yes, you did butcher the name, but you actually made it sound cooler than it is because it's Koolhoven. So having it being called the Koolhoven makes it quite a good meme vehicle, I guess. But yeah, the FK-51 is a trainer, so it's not really a fighter, but it was armed with a single machine gun, so I guess it deserves to be in the game, but it wouldn't be the most effective one. It's one of those classic trainer aircraft getting a machine gun. It was powered by a Armstrong Siddeley Cheetah, which makes it not the most powerful engine, but again, it's a really old vehicle in that regard. So we're looking at like 1935. So it's quite a nice startup, but it's not spectacular in any way.
For me, it kind of reminds me of the PO2, but without the bombs. I'm guessing it has no offensive armament. It just has the defensive armament on the back, or is there some kind of something it can do offensively, Cacti?
Well, I'm just looking it up right now. I believe it did carry some bombs, but these were just for training purposes. So we're talking really small bombs here, nothing really effective, and that is mainly why it's a reserve vehicle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Moving on from the first fighter line, we of course have the second fighter line, and that brings us 3 Fokker designs. Basically, 2 reserves and 1 1.0, and I'm guessing the difference between them is the engine, just looking at the stuff that we see in brackets. So how about it, Cacti? Tell us about this Fokker D series of vehicle.
Well, the D series of Fokker aircraft are fighter aircraft, so that's something you could keep in mind. Like when you see Fokker and it starts with a D, you just know it's a fighter design. So the first one is the D. Let me count here. D16, if I'm correct. This is it's your standard biplane, to be honest. As you can see with the next ones, the D27 or the 17, sorry, they look very close to a Fury, like the British reserves you have in the game right now. Well, there's honestly not a whole lot to say about these aircraft. They are your standard biplanes. They're armed with 2 machine guns firing forwards. They're agile, and they go about a speed of 345 kilometers an hour, and that is about it. But the main thing that you see in the tech tree here is it's the different engine designs. Gameplay-wise, it would not offer a lot of changes, but well, it's a small change. It's a different variant we thought we added in.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of all of the different HE-51s that we have, where it's, even though it's kind of samey, at the same time, I think it's always good to have a bunch of different variants of a similar vehicle, so at least you can kind of understand from a historic point of view what went into improving these vehicles, even if it is just a slightly different engine or something like that. Moving on from the second fighter line, we're having a look at the Naval line, which is something that is not in every single tech tree, and I definitely think it should be. So we're starting off with a Fokker C, and soldier, what is this thing about? Is it a recon aircraft? Is it a bomber? What do we find from this machine?
Yeah, the Dutch were really a big fan of reconnaissance planes. Like, we had such a high amount of reconnaissance plane, and this is one of them. It's a naval plane, which is uh, made clear because of the W behind it in its name, which kind of makes it, a water plane, hydroplane. This one is like pretty slow. It's 200 kilometers an hour. But it did have one fixed, one movable machine gun, making it not the greatest in that regard. But it could carry a torpedo, so it's practically a torpedo plane. Bit like a swordfish, but without any bomb load.
Yeah, it does. It does definitely remind me of the swordfish, especially with the way that it is set up with the torpedo. Does the W itself does it stand for a word, or is it just a letter in the name?
The Dutch did use some half German or maybe fully German names because he operated in Germany for quite a while. So the W could stand for Watervliegtuig, which is a Dutch word, or Wasserflugzeug, which is the German word.
Interesting. And the next one is the start off and the attacker heavy fighter line coming in coming in hard with another biplane from Fokker, the CVD. What is the deal with this one, Cacti? Is it like what makes it an attacker over some of the fighters that we've already seen?
Well, you did point it out correctly. This is an attacker. It is not a heavy fighter whatsoever. But this aircraft is basically a light bomber / reconnaissance aircraft designed by Fokker. The variant you see before you, the CV /D, actually carried, I think, about 6 50-kilogram bombs, if I'm correct. No, 4 50-kilogram bombs. So we're talking really light bombing capabilities here. But it has 2 machine guns firing forwards, and it has a gunner in the rear. It's just your standard starter bomber aircraft. It's kind of close to the Po-2, actually.
Yeah, I would compare it to that, or I would compare it to something like the HE-51 hydroplane. I don't. Sorry, not the hydroplane. The one that's in the tech tree that I can't remember the name of right now. But anyway, yeah, that's what I would compare it to. I'm sure.
The HS-129, I
Yeah,
think.
the HS-129. It seems like the same kind of getup as that, apart from maybe the 129 had a bit more power behind it. At the end of the day. The next one is looking like a TB3, if I'm quite honest. So let us know let us know, soldier, about this magnificently large aircraft.
Yeah, so Fokker did spend a little while in America, where he designed some planes for the American Air Force and stuff. He wasn't too successful in his period there, but he did design a few vehicles, the XB-8 being one of them. X standing obviously for experimental, so uh, it was a sluggish plane. Let's keep it at that. It gets like 275 kilometers an hour. Not great. It carries 2 machine guns, so it's the only thing I really don't know about it is actually the bomb load, which is quite important for a bomber. I would really like to know that, but yeah, it's a pretty sluggish, but it's a startup. You start here, so
Yeah, this Fokker guy seemed to pretty much go everywhere. I mean, did he ever end up in Russia, or was that too far afoot?
no, I don't think any Dutch planes actually went to Russia. So
The next aircraft, well, as you can see just by the marking system as well that Cacti was talking about, you can see that this is seen as more of a Dutch plane than it is an American, just by the line going through. So if you need an example of what he was talking about before, that would be it. The next plane though is the opposite, where it's a little bit more British than Dutch, and it's in the form of the Avro Anson, a machine I would love to see in the game just because of its very awkward design, which is very very apparent on a lot of machines of that era. Tell us a little bit about this cacti. Why are you seeing this as the premium of the first rank of vehicle?
The main reason why this one is a premium is when it comes to the rank 1 vehicles, the Dutch have plenty to fill it in on their own. But we still wanted to add in the ensign, so we thought, we'll just stick it in as a premium. It's an odd vehicle. If it ever comes to the British tech tree, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a premium there as well. And it's just one of those weird British aircraft that we Dutch used for some reason. So it's a premium. What can I say?
Yeah, the one of the nice things about these tech trees is at least the way I see them is if you wanted to add in foreign influence to them, you could easily give them some weird and wonderful vehicles, such as the Anson and even others which we used in that area. Now we go on to an event vehicle, though, which is definitely not a category you normally see in these style of tech trees, but I'm incredibly happy that we have it, since it is an important part of the game, especially with, in 2019, I believe we've had more events this year than any other year. They've been pushing them out incredibly quickly. So, Soldier, what is the deal with whatever this thing is? This looks like if you combined some form of weird amalgamated swordfish and once again like a TB, maybe to try and make a very odd BV series of aircraft.
Yeah, this is one of those lovely hydroplanes. This one was actually used as a torpedo bomber slash bomber, designated by the T designation. But it was the weaker one of the two. We'll soon also touch the A variant of it, which was an improvement upon it. But we didn't really need this one in the tech tree itself. And if in the case that the T4 A doesn't get added immediately after its launch, I could see the T4 being added as an event vehicle first, giving you the more powerful variant for free and the actual, the one you gain a event vehicle.
Yeah, I like that kind of thinking. I like the idea that we can have an event vehicle which is, similar to a vehicle in the tech tree, but it can come out before us. So therefore, people get kind of a nice little spice of life, kind of like with the FJ4B when that thing was added. Moving on to the second level of these. So obviously, with the arrows showing, you'd have to research the FK51 before the FK52. The arrows are pretty key when it comes to research for these vehicles. So you'd have to, research the ones before it. Onto the FK52 then, Cacti. Since the FK51 was seen as this training vehicle, was the FK52 the main production one, or what's the story of this machine?
Well, the FK52 was only built in very small numbers, right around 6 were made, but these were considered reconnaissance fighters. So they have, just like the usual armaments, they have 2 forward-firing machine guns, and they have 1 machine gunner in the rear, and it could carry 150 kilograms of bombs. I would expect this bomb mode to be carried in a couple of small bombs, so it's nothing scary. But honestly, this aircraft looks a whole lot like a step up from the 51, the one that comes before it. It has a fully close-up cockpit for the people to sit in. It's faster. I take it it's also more powerful. But yeah, in the end, we only built a very small amount of them, so they did not do a whole lot during the war.
Well, that's kind of sad, but at least, at least there was a few of them about, and once again, these are the ones straight after the reserve, so you don't expect, a ton from them. If you look at the British ones with the forms of the Gladiator and the Nimrod, they are interesting vehicles, but at the same time, not exactly meta effective. The next set of vehicles, though, sat in the second fighter line, do look a lot more promising, and these are some Fokker Ds. So what are these about, Soldier? Are they, to me, they kind of look like Reggianis for some reason, at least in design.
I've never looked at them as Reggianis, but yeah, these are a pretty old design, like 1936, I remember. But they were actually still built in like 1939. It was one of the more successful planes of Fokker, but also not that great, I guess, because these were still used when we got invaded. So not that great in that regard. But we actually have two variants here. One being partially Danish, which is quite unique, I guess. Um, that one was actually armed with Madsen cannons, making it quite a class cannon, I suppose, of not having that great flight performance, but actually being quite heavily armed. Uh, they were actually built by the Dutch for Denmark, so that's why they're actually industry. Uh, and uh, and they did also license build a few, but the starting point became Dutch, so that's why they're here. And then you have the second variant, which is the actual Dutch version, the one we used, which we're looking at like 460 kilometers an hour, not that fast uh, for like 1930 for 1940 standards, and they had like 479 millimeter Belgian Fabriek Nationale machine guns. So they are not that great for the time period, but they are quite iconic, going like all over the place. There are reports of them going to Spain, and they actually were license built by Finland. So I really hope we see at least one of the D21s in the Swedish factory. That would be really cool. But yeah, they had a fixed undercarriage, which for that time was quite a bad thing.
Yeah, that was definitely a design decision which, at least by the time of the war coming around, kind of disappeared for the majority of aircraft, and for good reason. Obviously, the drag issues which were caused by having fixed wheels was always not great for actual performance of the vehicle. Moving on to, once again, looking at the naval line, we have some more Fokker T's. So what are these ones about cacti? If we look at them compared to the other design, which is above, it looks like they have a closed canopy, which is probably nicer for the pilots, even though some pilots, such as the Italians themselves, really didn't like closed cockpits, which was always a mystery to me. Anyway, back to the Dutch. So what's this one about cacti?
Well, this is the more, I suppose, late war-ish seaplane we produced. This one was introduced in 1939. But basically, this is it's your standard seaplane, hydroplane, aircraft bomber thingy. It's actually classified as a torpedo bomber seaplane, and this one could just carry a 600 kilogram bomb or one torpedo. And also, it carried two 7.92 millimeter machine guns facing forwards. Its performance is not that great, 285 kilometers an hour. But honestly, the differences between these two variants that you see, the WG and the WC, is the WG is of a mixed wood and metal construction, and the WC is a slightly upgraded version of or a new design. It's larger, it has more powerful engines, and it's honestly a bit more beefier than the one that came before it.
So this was so when was this actually produced?
Well, the first flight was actually in 1939, but it was first introduced in 38, I meant, and it was introduced in 1939. And about 36 of them were built. So again, small numbers. But yeah, it's a minor nation. You cannot really expect a whole lot from it.
Oh yeah, you can't. Yeah, when you're never gonna have like a Spitfire standard or a T-34 standard when it comes to
Yeah.
these aircraft. But I would definitely say a number over 10 or a number over 5 is definitely good enough. The next set we're having a look at is some Fokker C series of aircraft, and these look like a general improvement, maybe over the last series. Looks like exactly the same fuselage, weirdly enough. Anyway, Soldier, what are these ones about? And what's the difference between the Series 1 and the Series 2 of this aircraft?
Yeah, so the C10 we're looking at is obviously an improvement upon the C5. Uh, Actually, being upgraded to make it actually way better. There were still biplanes though, which around the time of introduction was already getting phased out. So in that regard, they are quite outdated. But the Dutch really liked their biplanes, so that's why they kept doing it, I suppose. And the Series 1 was the first batch, I suppose. Uh, they were equipped with a Kerstal 2 engine, which made them a bit weaker than the Series 2. Furthermore, they had no cockpit cap, which makes them a little bit less protected, I suppose. But it was armed with two fixed machine guns and one backwards firing machine gun. So armament-wise, not that great, but it looks quite like a lot of fun for a biplane. And the Series 2, we're looking at another Kestrel, but this time the 5, which makes it a bit stronger. And it actually had one machine gun less, so it's quite a trade-off. But they look like really cool reconnaissance machines in my eyes, at least.
I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyins Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.